The British people are rising up. Patriots are seizing control from the ground up, from the streets to the ballot box, as massive crowds wave Union Jacks and chant for their country back at huge Reform UK rallies and anti-immigration protests. After just 22 months, Keir Starmer's Labour government is in freefall, with Reform UK surging in the polls and on track to become the biggest party in Parliament. The Prime Minister is in full panic mode, looking awkward and defensive as Labour collapses from landslide victory to the low 20s, while Reform leads at 24 to 28%, with projections of 266 to 324 seats. Is this the beginning of the end for Keir Starmer's government? After Labour stormed to a massive landslide victory in July 2024, with a huge parliamentary majority that many believed would bring stability and real change to Britain, the exact opposite has happened, triggering an unprecedented explosion of public anger that has completely reshaped the political landscape. Instead of delivering on promises, Keir Starmer's government has overseen record numbers of small boats crossing the channel with illegal migrants, a worsening housing and NHS crisis, persistent grooming gang scandals that were ignored or downplayed for years, spiralling knife crime and street violence in towns and cities across the country, punishing tax hikes and soaring living costs that have hammered working families, and a widespread feeling that traditional British culture, history, values and identity are being deliberately sidelined or erased in favour of mass migration and divisive identity politics. This deep and growing frustration has now boiled over into a powerful, unstoppable patriotic backlash that is shaking the very foundations of the old political establishment to its core, with millions of ordinary Britons finally saying enough is enough and demanding their country back. At the forefront of this surging movement stands Reform UK, led by the fearless and unstoppable Nigel Farage, who has transformed the party into the authentic voice of millions of forgotten and betrayed working-class and middle-class voters who feel completely abandoned by both Labour and the Conservatives. What started as protest votes has rapidly turned into concrete political power. Patriots aren't just protesting anymore. They're winning seats at every level, dramatically shifting the polls, dominating the conversation, and forcing a visibly rattled and desperate Keir Starmer into frantic damage control mode as his government's approval ratings sink ever deeper into the negatives, and his attempts to rebrand or attack the plastic patriots fall completely flat with an angry electorate. The sleeping giant of British patriotism has finally awoken with a roar. The old two-party system that took Britain for granted is crumbling before our very eyes, and the next general election could deliver the biggest political earthquake this country has seen in generations. The rise of the Patriots has been nothing short of extraordinary, transforming raw public anger into a disciplined and rapidly expanding political insurgency that is now conquering territory at every level of British democracy and proving that the people are finally taking their country back. Under Nigel Farage's fearless command, Reform UK has emerged as the authentic champion for millions who have watched their towns and cities change beyond recognition, while successive governments offered nothing but excuses and open borders. The turning point exploded into view during the May 2025 local elections, where Reform UK delivered a historic landslide, capturing a staggering 677 council seats and storming to outright control of 10 major authorities, including former Conservative heartlands like Kent, Staffordshire, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, Durham, Nottinghamshire, Lancashire, North Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire, and even Labour's long-standing stronghold of Doncaster. This was no fluke. It marked the first time Reform had ever taken control of any council in modern local government history, proving that patriotic voters were no longer content with protest votes, but were ready to govern. Adding to the drama, Reform also secured key mayoral victories, with Andrea Jenkins becoming mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, and another stunning win in Hull and East Yorkshire. That same electrifying night delivered one of the most jaw-dropping parliamentary moments in recent history, when Reform snatched the Runcorn and Helsby seat from Labour by a razor-thin margin of just 6 votes after a dramatic recount, overturning a previous Labour majority of over 14,000, with a massive swing that sent shockwaves through Westminster. Since then, Reform has maintained relentless pressure through dozens of council by-elections, consistently outperforming expectations and building a formidable ground operation, with thousands of new activists and local branches springing up across the country. And right now, in April 2026, the numbers tell an even more explosive story. Reform UK is consistently topping the national polls at 24 to 28% across major pollsters, while Labour has plummeted into the high teens, often slipping into third or fourth place. MRP projections show Reform on course for 266 to 324 seats, potentially making them the largest party in Parliament, and reducing Labour to around 100 seats or fewer. This is not mere protest politics anymore. It is a genuine takeover in motion, with Patriots organising, voting, and winning like never before. The energy on the streets has reached boiling point as ordinary Britons who once felt powerless are now pouring onto the streets in record numbers, turning quiet discontent into loud, proud displays of national pride that the mainstream media can no longer ignore. From coastal towns overwhelmed by small boat arrivals to inner cities scarred by grooming scandals and knife crime, Patriots are organising huge rallies, community meetings and flag marches that draw tens of thousands, sending a clear message that Britain will not be surrendered without a fight. These gatherings are not chaotic outbursts, but disciplined expressions of love for country, with families, veterans and working people standing shoulder to shoulder under the Union Jack, chanting for borders, safety and sovereignty, while rejecting the guilt and division pushed by the elite. The atmosphere is electric, the unity is growing, and every new event swells the ranks with fresh faces who realise they are no longer alone in wanting their nation back. The media and establishment are losing control of the narrative as the patriotic wave exposes the deep bias and disconnect in legacy outlets and Westminster corridors that have spent years dismissing concerned citizens as bigots or extremists. Newspapers and broadcasters that once shaped public opinion now scramble to explain the reform surge while desperately trying to smear it as dangerous. Yet their attacks only backfire and drive more viewers toward independent voices and social media, where the real stories of daily life under Labour are being told unfiltered. Senior figures in the old parties watch in horror as their comfortable consensus fractures, with even some lifelong Labour and Conservative voters crossing the floor to join the movement, admitting they can no longer defend policies that harm their own communities. This loss of narrative control is accelerating the collapse, leaving the establishment isolated and increasingly desperate as the British public tune out the spin and tune into the truth on the ground. Even splits within the right cannot stop the momentum, because the hunger for real change runs so deep that new voices like Restore Britain, emerging from frustration with any perceived softening, only highlight how widespread the demand for tougher action on immigration, crime, and cultural preservation has become across the patriotic spectrum. While Reform UK under Nigel Farage remains the dominant force with its proven election wins and massive polling lead, the appearance of harder line breakaways shows the genie is well and truly out of the bottle, forcing every party on the right to compete on who will deliver the strongest defence of British identity, ensuring the overall patriotic movement grows even stronger as more people realise compromise is no longer an option. The working class heartlands are shifting dramatically as traditional Labour strongholds that voted overwhelmingly for Starmer in 2024 are now turning away in droves, with lifelong supporters in former mining towns, northern cities and industrial areas openly declaring they have been betrayed by a party that prioritises global agendas over British workers. These communities, once the backbone of the left, are embracing the patriotic message of secure borders, fair wages and national pride, delivering massive swings to reform in by-elections and local votes as people reject empty promises and demand policies that put British families first. The shift is visceral and emotional, with former Labour voters standing alongside lifelong Conservatives at rallies, united by the shared experience of rising costs, declining services, and a government that seems more concerned with virtue signalling than protecting its own people, marking one of the greatest realignments in modern British political history. Women and families are joining the fight in growing numbers as mothers, grandmothers, and working women who once stayed silent now speak out loudly against the failures that have left their daughters vulnerable to grooming gangs, their streets less safe, and their children's future threatened by uncontrolled migration and cultural erosion. Across the country, women are leading community campaigns, organizing petitions, and turning up in force at demonstrations, demanding an end to two-tier policing and policies that put outsiders ahead of native British families. This awakening among women and families adds powerful new energy to the movement, broadening its appeal and proving that the patriotic backlash is not confined to any single group, but represents a cross-section of everyday Britons who simply want safety, fairness, and a country they can recognise as their own for generations to come. While the Patriots surge forward with unstoppable momentum, Keir Starmer finds himself trapped in a political nightmare of his own making, watching in visible panic as his once dominant Labour Party collapses from the huge landslide majority of July 2024 into electoral oblivion. Today, in April 2026, Labour is polling desperately in the high teens or even lower, sometimes slipping into third or fourth place, while Starmer's personal net favourability rating has cratered to around -48. In a desperate bid to claw back ground, Starmer has resorted to frantic cabinet reshuffles, parading his new top team as a so-called cabinet of patriots, a move widely mocked as a shameless attempt to steal the patriotic clothes of his opponents. At the same time, he has tried to clumsily claim the mantle of patriotism for himself, while repeatedly attacking Reform UK and the growing street protests as the work of plastic patriots, and a party of grievance and division. Yet these attacks ring completely hollow, because they come from the very government presiding over record small boat crossings, failures on crime and grooming gangs, punishing tax rises, and two-tier policing. Behind the scenes, the panic is intense, with emergency cabinet meetings, warnings about a potential summer of riots, and vows of a strengthened crackdown on protests. The result is a Prime Minister who looks increasingly rattled and defensive, whose government now faces the very real prospect of being reduced to a historic low if an election were called tomorrow. Keir Starmer's panic is the panic of an entire political establishment that believed it could ignore the British people indefinitely. What has fueled this explosive patriotic backlash is a perfect storm of raw, everyday grievances that millions of ordinary Britons have been forced to endure, while their government appeared either unwilling or unable to act. At the heart of the anger sits the relentless immigration and small boats crisis, with record numbers of illegal migrants crossing the Channel almost daily, overwhelming communities and costing taxpayers billions. Closely linked is the shocking rise in crime, knife attacks in once peaceful towns, the long-buried grooming gang scandals, and failures of integration that have left parallel societies growing in many cities. On top of this comes crushing economic pain, with punishing tax hikes, stubborn inflation, soaring energy bills, and a jobs market where native Britons often feel pushed aside. But the backlash runs even deeper into cultural territory, with bitter rows over flying the Union Jack, the widespread perception of two-tier policing, and growing fears over free speech. These tensions erupted visibly in 2025 with large-scale protests and riots, massive nationalist gatherings drawing tens of thousands, including huge Tommy Robinson-led rallies with over 100,000 people waving Union Jacks, and loud public chants of "Starmer out" at stadiums and events. The powerful contrast is impossible to ignore. Proud patriots marching with British flags held high versus the government response that many see as weak, dismissive, or actively hostile to native British concerns. So what happens next in this unfolding political earthquake? The coming months will prove decisive, with crucial local and council by-elections throughout 2026, giving Reform UK more opportunities to rack up wins, while mounting pressure could force Keir Starmer into calling a snap general election earlier than he wants. Reform's path to becoming the official opposition, and potentially even forming the next government, now looks increasingly realistic, with projections showing them on course for hundreds of seats and the tantalising prospect of the biggest upset in British political history. Yet this dramatic shift is not without risks. Escalating tensions, larger protests, and the possibility of government overreach with new protest laws and tighter restrictions. But despite these dangers, the overriding mood is one of optimism. The silent majority is no longer silent. It has found its voice, its organisation, and its power at the ballot box, and real lasting change is finally coming to Britain after decades of betrayal. The old system is crumbling, and a new era where the concerns of native Britons come first is within reach. The Patriots are taking over Britain, from the streets packed with Union Jacks to the ballot box, where reform is storming ahead and turning anger into real power. Keir Starmer's panic is just the beginning as his government collapses in the polls, and the old establishment crumbles before our eyes. The UK is waking up, the silent majority has finally spoken, and real change is coming at last. The question now is simple. Will Keir Starmer survive the storm? Or is this the end of his short and disastrous time in Downing Street? If you believe Britain belongs to the British people, smash that like button, subscribe for more unfiltered truth, and drop a comment below. What do you think? Is a reform landslide coming in the next election? Share this video far and wide, and let's keep the momentum going.